they require an appraiser in some cases to be working weekends because the lender judges them in total calendar days of turn time, just as one example. And so
everybody's feeling the pain. Of course, lenders want better rates to generate more loans. The real estate agent community wants better rates.
Lucky episode number 13, Market Moves with Mark and Jeff. This episode, we'll be discussing a series of current topics that are on the minds of Jeff and I. Fed rate cuts. We got a full 50 basis point cut from the Fed in surprising fashion. We'll be talking about the rise of the national appraisal firm, ? And we'll be talking about the Appraisal Summit that just was held last week and Jeff spoke at. Look forward to getting into it.
Well, Mark, great to be back with you again here. A couple of things we wanted to talk about or discuss on the docket. And the first of them being this, I've seen some comments around this dichotomy or this perspective of this large appraisal firm kind of evolving or just showing up on the scene. My perspective, if I tap into my historical database, is that this isn't maybe as new of a concept as it might seem. I think the names that you may see out there are different from what they've been in the past, but it's been interesting to see some of the commentary around, are these new appraisal firms just popping up out of the blue? Has it ever been this way, or has it always just been sole practitioners in the appraisal space?
Jeff, yeah, this topic is near and dear to you and I's heart here, as we are part of a large appraisal firm initiative. And I've seen a number of comments and a lot of question and even misunderstanding of even what you and I are involved in, thinking that maybe we're part of an appraisal management company, which we are specifically not. And when we launched our initiative in January of 2020. We set out to specifically serve appraisal management companies, but also to be an option for lenders that weren't using appraisal management companies or wanted to consider using appraisers directly. In our world, we haven't specifically been out there trying to pitch a lender to not use an appraisal management company. It's really not the place of an appraiser, it feels like to me, but we do want to be there for an option should folks want to do that. And, from my perspective, the appraisal firm is not new. The large appraisal firm, we've had William Fall, Metro West, Forsyth, just to name a few that come to mind here that have been around, as I was getting into the industry. Interestingly, those that I just named aren't around anymore. They've been acquired, but they've been around for a long time. And I think you've seen a number of appraisal firms pop up, large, national in scope, most, but also trying to provide a little bit different flavor and opportunity or offering to the marketplace, and maybe a little bit more coordinated support in consistency in product and maybe an attempt to be a little better in customer service than can easily be achieved by a one-off appraiser. I have sat here in this space for 20 years, and usually the number is 1.2 average people per appraisal shop or firm. And so as you're out inspecting, it's hard to answer the phone and tend to a client or get a new order in or whatever. So for me, in my perspective, is that appraisal management companies, and this has been a bit of a subject this year that I think is important to touch on, how difficult it can be for an appraiser to serve an appraisal management company in this environment. A lot of the difficulties that appraisal management companies put on appraisers are not their doing, as far as I can tell. They are cutthroat competing against one another. The lenders kind of pit them against one another in terms of metrics and turn times and quality and all of these sorts of things, and then get allotment or share of those appraisals based on how they perform amongst other appraisal management companies. And, they might be competing once a month and allotment changing one way or another. And so, they are forced into a very cutthroat competition environment. And so that ends up being the case for appraisers. And there are all kinds of really difficult things for appraisers to serve. Often in different ways. It can be almost impossible at times. A lot of the order placement is run by algorithms and sort of things that end up being cutthroat. They require an appraiser in some cases to be working weekends because the lender judges them in total calendar days of turn time, just as one example. And so, there's a requirement of an appraiser to be working Saturdays and Sundays. And if they don't, they aren't going to be competitive with the appraiser that does. And I think that creates a really difficult environment for an appraiser to compete within. If you're going to be successful, you kind of got to do it, or else you're not going to be competitive. And it's an extremely challenging environment for appraisers to come together. And so, what my hope is that an appraisal firm can come together and look at the challenging environment that exists. How do AMCs need to be served by appraisers, and can a coordinated effort from a large firm help appraisers satisfy those often extremely difficult demands that are placed on us? And to some extent, I've seen that being a reality. I think it's in existence, and I think there is a place for a large appraisal firm to serve the appraisal management company in that way, but also to satisfy those lenders directly that are wanting to do that. So just a few thoughts that I've got on the subject.
As you say that, Mark, it really resonates. And I think sometimes is what's lost at the appraiser who's kind of at the end of the row, seeing how they're treated by some of these AMCs. And I mean, I see in social platforms a lot of, disdain for the AMCs. And certainly I've seen abuses. I mean, even at a regulatory level, we've had complaints filed at our state that we've heard where, in cases AMCs are putting, pressure or doing things they shouldn't be. But I think the broader context is important to understand that they're also in a cutthroat environment. And so I think what happens is because that trickles down to the appraiser, there's then this feeling that they're just taking advantage of the appraiser, and there's a lot of animosity there. And in some cases that may not be unfounded, but I think there's more to the context of what's going on at a broad scale than what the appraiser at the end of the row might be seeing or experiencing. I have a friend who years ago started an AMC, sold it, and was a couple years later, a few years ago now, was looking at maybe getting back into that space. And he said, man, the operational expenses, you got to get bonded in all the states, you got to get licensed. Like what it is to run and operate one in today's environment is much different than it was 15 or 20 years ago. And he made the decision consciously, I don't want to do that again. Like that's not a space I want to be in. And when volumes contract, which they have, there's not nearly as many loans being done as there were in the COVID days. It's cutthroat for everybody. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to be an appraiser and to do a good job on the technical appraisal report writing side, as well as the customer service and the business side. Whether you're an independent appraiser, whether you're a firm, there are real challenges with serving, anybody who needs appraisal services well. And I've said, and I continue to believe, I think there's a space for the sole proprietor appraiser alongside or in the same market with an appraisal firm. And frankly, I think in many cases, the type of client that wants to work with one maybe isn't as well suited to work with the other, and vice versa. I don't see it as a zero-sum game, except that we all feel it much more acutely when volumes are low. And we'll talk a little bit about interest rates, and hopefully that has a little bit of a tailwind instead of a headwind that we've all been trying to fight against for the last 18 or 24 months. But it's a complex issue, and I see the pain points on both sides of it.
Yeah, Jeff, I can naively maybe, but proudly say that I do not know the first thing about operating an appraisal management company. I have never owned one. I don't know anything about it. But what I have done is spent 2.5 decades serving appraisal management companies, often when my peers are telling me I'm insane for trying to serve them, right? Because of the very difficult competitive environment that they place appraisers in. Downward pressure on fees in certain cases. There's all sorts of reasons, silly underwriting stuff. The lists go on and on. And I try to be an expert in serving appraisal management companies and thereby serving the marketplace. And often appraisal management companies are the most difficult folks to serve in the marketplace. Maybe not always because of complexity in underwriting and appraisal theory, but because of the business elements of appraisal that are required of appraisers to serve appraisal management companies, the very quick turn time, juggling a whole bunch of business tasks while trying to get a report out quickly. Those things are hope to have some competence in and have learned a lot about. So so an important topic to me. And what I hope is that to the extent that there are very heavy demands on appraisers, I want appraisers to be there to meet those demands. I don't think that it is a optimistic future for appraisers as a whole if our response is you shouldn't want that from me. I'm going to try and convince you to want something different. I'm worried about our future and our role in the mortgage process down the road if that's our response. What I hope our response can be, not from everybody, but for a contingent of the appraiser population, is to look up and say, hey, yeah, okay, you need that from us? No, it is not easy. We have to really bend over backwards to make this happen, but we'll figure out a way to do it.
And what you're talking about there is service level type things. Obviously, there are professional standards that appraisers are going to adhere to, and that's one of the things that the AMC should be doing is protecting, that part of it. Now, whether they do or not, I mean, I hear some appraisers complain, but this is the service level. All things above board, all things following our professional standards. That part is challenging, and it's been interesting for me to see that there tends to be a vacillation a little bit. And I've seen some big national lenders move away from, running their appraisal ordering through an AMC to an in-house department or an alternative way of placing those orders. And I think what everybody acknowledges is it's a challenge and it's a cost center, whether I have the in-house appraisal department and I order the appraisals, I review the appraisals, I follow up on the status and do all those things that have to be done, whether they choose to outsource that or keep it in-house. It's a function that requires time and capital, for a lender to be able to operate effectively. And I mean, I love serving direct, engaged lenders, but anybody who needs an appraisal that you can work with, that makes economic sense. It's a service industry, and it's a challenging one, I think, for any of us, regardless of how we choose to operate, within it.
Yeah, and I think, Jeff, not everybody would feel this way, and I certainly understand that. When I set out to try and do something with a large appraisal firm or to build one, part of my hope was that, I guess to a size where our firm could have a seat at a table, and not just appraisal management companies who are the obvious ones that have had enormous size for so long that are sort of dictating down to appraisers. I hope that we can have a seat at the table, whether it is PREA discussions or whatever the issues of the day are, that appraisers should be able to have meaningful input in settings where we wouldn't otherwise have if we are just operating on our own in sort of a more inward facing relationship with the profession.
Absolutely. There's a lot of animosity, out there in the moment, and I would rather see appraisers have a seat at the table, exactly like you're saying, as opposed to only, AMCs or representatives of a specific contingent, where decisions are made that impact appraisers, directly. There are professional organizations, obviously there are firms, there are AMCs, there are a lot of stakeholders that all I really believe should have voices heard, but certainly the appraiser should have their voice heard and be represented. These decisions that are made, at the national level, whether it's how you engage appraisers or, the standards that impact them or, all of those things that are on the table for discussion.
Beautiful. Well, I appreciate that discussion. As I said, it's near and dear to my heart. I think yours as well. And so glad to be able to touch on that here. Fast forwarding to the topic that everybody is thinking about these days was what I consider a very surprising move by the Fed yesterday. We're recording this on September 19th, but a surprise move on September 18th from Jerome Powell in a 50 basis point Fed rate reduction. What are your thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, I was really surprised. In fact, I saw a few who had a countdown as to appraisers, who had a countdown as to when they were making an announcement. We always like to have a favorable rate environment, but I think I've seen more appraiser engagement in what the Fed is doing than I've seen in a long time. And And it kind of speaks to that, contracted volume that we were just talking about. Everybody's feeling the pain. Of course, lenders want better rates to generate, more loans. The real estate agent community wants better rates because it's easier to sell and facilitate transactions in that environment. But it was a surprise. I got several texts from appraisers that never text me about, the Fed or rates, saying, hey, that's a 50%, drop. One of the things that's a little bit interesting, though, is I think some of the reactions have been maybe different than what you might have expected. The stock market, you have to correct me if I get this wrong. I think initially liked it, but then kind of corrected, a little bit to close out the day. And even the 10-year Treasury kind of unexpectedly went the opposite direction and increased a bit. I know you were watching that.
Yeah, we talked about on our episode last week when we made our 25 basis point prediction, which was half right, I guess you could say.
I'll take it.
Wrong. Yeah. But that if it was 25 basis points, we absolutely would see no change in the 30-year mortgage rate. When we saw the 50, I said, maybe we'll get under 5 here with that move. But the 10-year Treasury said, no. It actually increased and has held here where the morning after. And it's risen even above the rate that it was at yesterday at I'm looking at it right now. It's 3.74, the 10-year Treasury as I'm looking at it right now. And I think all of that says that even the 50 basis point drop was priced in to the marketplace as I see it right now. They expected Powell to do it because of some weakening economic data. Maybe it is a little bit of calculus with the election year and the election coming closely. I'm not as cynical. I don't think that that is a reason behind this sort of stuff. I think it was time to make a move. I'm a little concerned that it was too much and that we might see inflation rear its head. And I think the market might be a little concerned when they see this 50-point cut. Oh man, were we really in a healthy enough or negative enough economic cycle to withstand that drop? So some initial thoughts there before I go into some others. Do you have anything else to add?
The other side of that coin, possibly, and everybody prognosticates, and nobody really knows what the future holds. But I did see some, also posting articles saying, well, hey, the last time the Fed cut 50 basis points, it was right before the Great Recessions, the Great Recession, which is still on, some of our minds. Is it possible that they're reading, more economic weakness than what the numbers are showing currently? We've had, reprints of job numbers that are always revised down for the last 12 or 14 months or something, not as rosy as what initially it came out as. It's hard to know exactly, but there may be, it could be that there's more softness in the economy and not less. But, for whatever reason, I think them making the bigger cut, was where they landed. There was little discussion as to whether they should have cut last time and didn't. And so were they trying to make up a little bit of ground in the meantime? And also, did they want to cut enough so that there wasn't the political pressure to make a cut until after an election to be, to avoid the perspective of, trying to influence things one way or another there too?
I think it was the end of last week, the soon to be outgoing CEO of Chase Bank, Jamie Dimon, had suggested that we may be in for something worse than a recession. I think was the quote that I saw from him. And I do wonder if the market, these rises are also maybe reading and wonder if Powell is hoping to signal that a 50 basis point cut is because they see a possibility of pain coming economically here over the next several months, and whether that's 12 months, 3 months, whatever it is. And I wonder if the market is reading this action being more than what a lot of people thought. As is a read of oh crap, we better act quickly. So interesting there. Jeff, I wanted to say, so the rates aren't moving. We talked on the last episode of rates being at 7.4% some 60 days ago. And when we had our podcast recording last week, the rate was like 6.15 or 6.2, and so it has dropped a ton out ahead of this Fed cut, which is the market pricing in the Fed cut. And so far, it's not really moved since the announcement yesterday. So rates aren't changing in the moment without further rate cuts. If we're looking, it may take a while for the 30-year mortgage to react to that. But the point that I wanted to discuss in what I feel is just real estate market participants. That is the buyers and sellers out there of residential property. I think the sentiment of them, the mentality of them, is what has been a really interesting human psychology study, right? Is that they just sort of quit sometime in the middle of the summer and said, look, for a whole variety of reasons, it's not much more costly in the middle of this summer than it was in the spring, but I'm not doing it. And maybe it's because I think things are going to get more affordable soon. Maybe it's because I don't feel confident in my job that if I see layoffs happening all over the place. So there's been this sentiment here, but also reading from the Fed, they might be concerned, or they're leaving the interest rates up there and saying, hey, wait, because we're going to come down, right? I kind of want you to wait as they left rates there for 8-10 months, whatever it's been. And so I believe that this 50-point basis cut really begins to start to address the negative buyer sentiment that is out there. And so I think we could start to see mortgage applications pick up, even if the rates don't move meaningfully, because there's a little bit more optimism that is sort of inferred to market participants.
Yeah, I've joked a little bit that everybody's just been waiting for the Fed to tell them it's okay to go ahead and start buying. Like we're in this rate reduction cycle now, and I do think there is something to that psychology. And as I think about it, Mark, the last market swing, there was a lot of optimism. It overheated, as far as the housing market, but it was based on momentum. The momentum, swung past, way past the point of equilibrium. And then as there started being, the financial crisis started, you started having financial institutions with real pain, going out of business, taking lots of losses. The housing market, then swings the other way and overcorrects. But it's this psychology, it's this momentum based, kind of perception in the market that takes a while to kick in. But then once it does, it's hard to, to scale it back, I think. And I remember, there were foreclosures, home pricing. When I look at home pricing in 2010, 2011, 2012, I mean, you could buy 3 houses, it seems like, for the price of one in today's environment. And I think it had overcorrected in the, on the short side there. In this cycle, the forces are a little bit different, but we had interest rates drop precipitously, which then it made it easy for people to afford much, higher purchase prices, which drove the pricing up. And now we've been stuck at this high price point, and then we go from dropping the rates, dramatically to jacking them up dramatically. And the housing market seems to have a hard time adjusting to rapid changes one way or the other. And it just causes pain. I was just reading an article from a new print on home builder sentiment, talking about it's gotten marginally better, I think, from a 39 to a 41 point, where 50 is kind of a neutral outlook. They're still, very much in the negative territory. And part of the reason for that is that their costs, building pricing is still high. Land costs are still high relative to what people can afford to pay. And so I think to what your point was, is marginal changes in the mortgage interest rate, or even a percent change, hasn't pulled a lot of people off the sidelines, because it's not making a big enough difference in the monthly affordability to have a bunch of people, coming off the sidelines and start, buying again. And it may take a change in home pricing. And I don't know if this will happen, but I know what happened last time is, once the psychology was, hey, home values are coming down, they came down and kept going for probably longer than they needed to. I don't know that that'll happen this go around, but it certainly is a possibility, it seems.
Yeah, I think most appraisers out there doing new construction appraisal work around the country will tell you that they have seen an enormous increase in concessions. The builders got hot and they were selling a boatload of stuff out there, but you have seen a huge increase in concessions as the year has gone on here. And then I've been seeing, completed new construction inventory sitting on the lots and looking to sell. So you've seen some of that happen. And, I think that's a bit of the affordability, but it really is the stillness in the buyer the buyer sentiment that has just said, you know what, I'm gonna wait and see here. And so I think this is an important signal to those folks that might have been waiting, probably subconscious, not overt, but I do think that signal is out there. And Jeff, as we close out this topic, pretty amazing. I hope I have this right, but it was September 18th of 2007 that the Fed dropped rates 50 basis points. September 18th, yesterday, that they dropped 50 basis points. So just incredible that the timing of that. Life is stranger than fiction.
Well, it really is. Is it Elon that said that, that reality will find like the most humorous or ironic like way forward? I don't remember. I'm butchering his quote, but it's crazy how these things, play out. And I'm certainly not wishing a lot of pain on everybody, but these markets do cycle, and it's, we're here to observe it and get beat up along the way, it feels like.
Well, Mr. Conference, Jeff Morley here, you attended yet another conference this week. So this is hot off the press, the Appraisal Summit in Las Vegas. And my understanding is you spoke on adjustment support and what appraisers ought to be considering as options out there. Would love to get an update for those that weren't able to attend and are interested in what everybody's talking about.
Yeah, you bet. Just a couple of maybe high-level takeaways. As you said, Mark, I did present for 45 minutes, and we talked about this coming out of the Val Expo, and I'll kind of explain the reason why it matters, or is maybe a high focal point in the moment. But I remember our conversation. We talked about appraisers can't and never should have just been making up a number. A pool is worth X number of dollars because that's what I've always done for it, or an extra garage is worth whatever. There are ways that you can look at what the market actually pays for those kinds of amenities, for marginal living area, a bunch of things that go into the house that people care about. And appraisers have a number of tools to be able to extract or identify what is the market actually paying for these different amenities and things that that most buyers want in a home. Well, a lot of the reason around this is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have come out recently. And in fact, Freddie's chief appraiser, multiple times I've heard him say that their focus is on appraiser accountability, meaning the appraiser being able to explain and have market data for what it is they're doing in the appraisal reports, not just simply saying, I've always handled this kind of feature this kind of way, so that must be good enough in today's environment, when, as we just got done talking about, pricing is drastically different today than it was 10 years ago. And in fact, at the conference, one of the things that Freddie's chief appraiser, Scott Reuter, had said is that they've observed that appraisers continue to adjust, for differences in living area in homes at about $30 to $40 a square foot, even though they've seen the per square foot price double and triple in many markets around the country in the last 5 or 6 years. And they're saying, look, if the market is actually paying more for a couple hundred extra square feet in a house than this $30 or $40 that appraisers have historically used, then they should be adjusting at more than what they've historically adjusted for. And so they're looking at that and saying, hey, appraisers, you need to have support. You need to be able to explain why the market is doing what it is, and be able to support that. So that wasn't a new topic, but it was definitely emphasized again, and I think something that should be on appraisers' minds. And I think for anybody that appraisal touches, that they should have a reasonable expectation that an appraiser is reflecting what the market's actually doing. Nobody wants an appraisal that comes in lower than a contract price because they're saying, well, pools are only worth $20,000 when you're $20,000 short, and there's pretty good market support that says the market's actually paying $40,000 or $50,000 for those pools today. You shouldn't be missing the mark as an appraiser simply because you haven't kept up with the times and the changes in market, pricing and preferences. One other thing that was kind of cool that we did, Mark, was a bit of a pre-conference event. And there's a link to this for anybody who's interested now. But we, for the first time, recorded a Supervisor Trainee event where we had some people talk about topics that are really come up in that environment. We had Craig Capilla talking about just some of the legalities of how supervisors and trainee appraisers work together, things that they ought to be aware of and doing to avoid problems, in the relationship or when they go to get certified. We had Hansel Dobbs talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. He pulled up ChatGPT and actually, showed some best practices for prompting to get information, related to valuation specifically coming out of there. As a side note, one of our mutual friends and partners had reached out about a standards question. I took our standards document, uploaded it into ChatGPT, and said, "Hey, where does it address these different things?" And it found the references way faster than I would have scanning an index or even doing a word search or something within the document. So he showed some good tools there. We've got a prominent appraiser, Jim Amron, who wrote the book about artificial intelligence in appraisal specifically. He was there presenting and kind of the same thing. And it was interesting. Chat, specifically OpenAI, dropped a new version, a new release of their Chat GPT on Thursday, just right before the conference, it kicked off. And so they were all kind of geeking out about, like, how does this work? And they went through this thing that was kind of interesting. I don't know if you heard about this or not, but I think it's Chat 4.0, if you ask it how many letters are in the word strawberry, it'll lie to you. Like it won't get it right. It'll say there's only 2 R's in that word. And so they supposedly named the new release, like the Strawberry Project or something, trying to get it to like, Jim talked about it, as being hallucinating, which is the common term, but really what that means is it's lying or it's wrong, like it's screwed up. I think hallucinating maybe is, I don't know if it's a softened term or if because some of the psychedelics that the Silicon Valley is fond of, if that's more of what they relate it to. But this new drop is supposedly accounting for better the mathematical part of the what you're asking Chat to do for you. But they talked about each of these releases is like, I think he said 200 to 300 times more powerful in the runs that they're doing on the training models and stuff. And it is just exponentially getting better. It hasn't been flawless, and it still isn't. But that was one of the really interesting takeaways I had from the conference was, that there were multiple instances where, artificial intelligence is not replacing appraisers. It's not writing reports. It's getting better at doing things that can help appraisers, I think. And so it was fun to see, some of the specifics and in the weeds of how do you actually make it do, what you want it to help support your practice and what you're doing.
Yeah, interesting. Well, that's fascinating to know. And, I think it was a couple podcasts ago, I said that I was a bit ho-hum about artificial intelligence. And it is actually how I feel in the moment, although I expect it's going to change rapidly. And ho-hum is going to be a dangerous outlook to have sooner rather than later. But amidst that statement, which I hope will be Market Move's MO, we will bring someone on to tell me that I'm an idiot for that perspective. And against his better judgment, Jim Amron has agreed to come on at some point in the near future. So we'll be discussing AI quite a bit there, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I am too. I got a chance. I've known the name for a long time. I got a chance to meet him in person, and that was pretty fun. My sense is that we may not have to look very far to find people to come on and call us idiots if we want to extend that invite. So we'll queue you up and maybe just take our punches. But one last thing that was worth noting, and kind of ties us back to our roots a little bit on Pera, Kelly Davids, who we've had on here talking with us, announced that they're having a roundtable where they're bringing in the Pera graduates to the next, I think it was the Board of Trustees meeting that they have this fall. And just talk to them about what their experience was, what were the pros, what were the cons, how can the program be better, and those sorts of things. We'll have more graduates, continue to emerge, but it's kind of fun to hear that they were actually bringing them in person to, I think, try to understand how's this thing going and how can it get better from where it is. I think she announced, and we touched on this, but she confirmed there are 5 other Pera program providers actively in the works. None have announced specifically, so we don't have any, breaking news on that front just yet. But I was a little surprised that it was that many still actively developing a course out there. So there'll be more to come on that for sure.
Wonderful. Well, that meeting that Kelly's talked about is the kind of iteration that is going to be critical and absolutely present in developing a program like this. You get out there, you launch something, you learn, then you iterate and refine. So I hope that continues. That's great to hear.
Absolutely. I've seen some of the haters out there saying, they've only graduated 7. This is a blazing failure. I've seen others, on the opposite end saying, Oh, well, they're just bringing this on so that AMCs can, hire all of these Pera grads, and they're all going to take our jobs by the tens of thousands. And neither one of those is accurate or factual, but it's exactly what you said, Mark. It takes time. This is not bringing on thousands of appraisers in a day, a week, a month, or even a year at a time. But it's an alternative way to get in that is playing out in real time, and it's interesting to observe it. But having seen some of the shortcomings in the supervisor trainee model, it's interesting to see how this one plays out.
Well, Jeff, I can say now with 13 episodes in here that I am almost beginning to enjoy this time with you. I don't know if I'd say it just yet, but we're getting there. We're getting there. Enjoyed talking about the topics today, and look forward to the fun thing about this is who knows what we end up talking about next week. Usually it is informed by whatever's going on over the next 5 days, 7 days or so. So look forward to further conversations.
I can reciprocate that, Mark. I almost enjoy talking with you too. I'm just kidding, but no, it's great. I enjoy these, and it helps kind of force me into what's going on and how's it relevant in the real estate space. So I look forward to next week.
Look, I've almost had to pinch myself, Jeff, that believing that we don't deserve a more optimistic interest rate cycle. I can't even change my verbiage. So it is a big week for appraisers and all market participants. It's a big week. We have all survived a historically negative time together, and the pain for me could bring tears to my eyes. Honestly, it has been very real pain, and I know many of you have felt that same thing. And this marks an end of that. Whether we see mortgage applications rise now or not, maybe not. But it does mark an end of horrible headwinds that we have been facing for the better part of 2 years.
Absolutely. It's always interesting to observe how the actual change, takes place in real time, but it's encouraging to feel like, and I know as I talk to loan officer friends and real estate agents that are out there dealing with buyers and sellers every day, the sentiment is shifting, for sure. And I'm hopeful that there will be some tailwinds for all of the market participants to benefit from, because man, it has been a rough go the last 2 years, no doubt.
Anybody watching, you've got comments or topics that you'd like us to touch on, please leave them in the comments wherever you're watching the podcast. We pick those up and be happy to discuss anything that we think might be relevant for the viewers. So thanks again, Jeff. Look forward to talking next week.
You got it. Thanks, Mark.